Om Namah Shivaya. So I'm very grateful to be here. I'm glad our speakers are here and arriving. And I have seen all the people arriving also for the symposium. And we've already been here in Yoga of Recovery having a 7-day Yoga of Recovery retreat and training. And so congratulations to the students that have been with us this week. We had our graduation this afternoon. And for me, it's been a beautiful week with those students and, time in our meditation room together and time in this beautiful setting. So all the different aspects of being in an immersion and retreat together. And we're welcoming back a lot of people here in the room with us that have done Yoga of Recovery with us in previous years. So I'm glad you're here and all the other people here for the symposium. And hello to TTC students. You had your first day off today, so that's nice. I did my TTC back in 2002 at the yoga farm in California. So I know how cherished that day off is. And so tonight, I thought I'd take you through some of the aspects of Yoga of Recovery very briefly. And I'm going to also hopefully give you a little overview of what will happen during the Recovery Symposium. And so I introduced myself as a person in progressive long-term recovery. And through grace, gratitude, and service, 12-step programs, yoga, and Ayurveda as my support, I have the following sober dates. And so this is a progressive path that I'm on. There's always room for progress and new things being revealed to me. So in 98, I embarked again on a recovery path. And in 99, if you notice that date, 2nd of January, just after New Year's Eve, that took hold. And then within the year, another shift had been made where I was convinced, brought to a place where I was ready to leave cannabis behind. I had been on what some people know as a marijuana maintenance program. And then another, I'm going to say that's nearly a year and a half later, I let go of cigarettes and let go, not an easy process. Really, this was around the time that I had first come into an ashram. So it's always important to know that I used the ashram as a smoking rehab. That was the first time that I came. Before that, I had lived in London and I had practiced yoga at the London Centre. And so always making, confessions at the satsang level. I would go to the yoga classes and then go straight to the bar and drink and smoke and then go to work and then do it all again 2 or 3 nights later. So the yoga was in my life, but there was other things that were obstacles to it. And then I put this other date up somewhere in 2005 because I don't actually have a birthday for this one, which probably makes my husband quite happy because I insist on gifts for all the other dates. He says I have more birthdays than the Queen. And that's as it should be. And so it's somewhere in 2005, I came into like an emotional bottom around relationships and joined another 12-step program, one of the people programs. So I'm familiar with many different aspects of recovery, and I really know what has supported me, and I'm always interested in sharing that and hearing how other people have used it. And I've just been amazed at how it seems to me in these 20 years that I've been doing this, how much creativity and how much new progress is being made as people find a new way to talk to each other and find different venues to share some of this information with each other. So this evening, I thought I'd talk a little bit about what Yoga of Recovery is, who is it for, when, So when would a person engage in yoga of recovery? That's something that comes up with us quite regularly. What is it? Where is it offered? So a little overview of some of the ideas behind yoga of recovery. So who is it for? We need to move on from the them and us mindset. This is something that the addiction has a fairly stigmatized perspective from people looking into the problem. But as we're going to talk tonight, yes, there's been that as a history, but now we're moving into the 21st century and many things are updating and we're getting new ideas. And so the idea now is that we're putting faces and voices to people in recovery, no longer thinking it's some secret society that we belong to, which is the anonymous groups. And there's a lot of reasons that people still like to be anonymous, but there's also reasons that we might want to allow stories to be told and faces and voices to be put to people who have been successful in recovery, so that we can have some feeling of trust that people can make major shifts in their life and, you know, come into a new way of being with the help of probably multi-modalities over a pathway of recovery. So if I was to say yoga of recovery is for everyone, you know, that might seem a little strange, but I'm going to talk you through. I probably had my limited idea of who yoga of recovery would serve, like people like me. And then more and more people came, and then it became more and more vibrant, more alive, and also it developed into more understanding of all the addictive tendencies that we were dealing with. So obviously it's for people affected by addiction and self-destructive behaviors, but it's also for people who have family members with histories of addiction. And when I say that, there's this thinking of like, maybe I had an addicted parent, or I have an addicted spouse or child. But it could also be people that were in your family that are no longer alive, that have still left some kind of feeling of dysfunction within the family, because people change to incorporate the disease and the dysfunction within the close people around us. And in yoga recovery, our guests have ranged so far between 16 and 84 years old. And that has surprised and delighted me. And then we have all addictive and self-destructive tendencies. So when we make an invitation to yoga of recovery, see, these are some of the words that I use. And I use words of how people describe themselves to me. So there's this struggling that's going on in our life. There's a lot of suffering. There's people who are living with a kind of suspicion that they feel like they're doing things right, but they're not really getting a feeling that they could continue to do things this way for very long. Like the lifestyle they've chosen is not sustainable. The amount that they have to give in just to keep on a level playing field, you know, a level keeping the wheel going is more than they're able to manage. And then a lot of people are just in stress and striving. It feels like their entire life from every day of the week. And then there's an awful lot of people that are successful on the outside, but they really feel as if they're dying on the inside. And they may have all the trappings of material success and a career and all the things we're supposed to have, but they feel increasingly the more they get, the more this painful hole in the soul feeling, like an inner emptiness that arises the more people get. And so those things have been dealt with in the last, in the time that I've been looking at this. People that have come forward to talk about that are people like Dr. Martin Seligman in his work in positive psychology and his, you know, different understandings of what make people happy. And so we talk about that in yoga of recovery. Some of the people that I've trained in yoga of recovery have gone on and become people who train other people in yoga of recovery and positive psychology. So those things are interesting. What they did was trawl through the spiritual texts to find out what's the scripture said about what makes people happy, and then they brought it into psychology and tried to operationalize that. And so it's an interesting piece of work because they talk about what makes people happy as a pleasant life. You give me things, luxury things, and I'm happy. Some people that doesn't give the same level of happiness to, so then they want a meaningful life, so something that they can apply themselves to. An engaged life, so something that keeps them occupied in flow, which would be like a state of Raja Yoga. And then the last one is a state of meaning and purpose. So I'm engaged in something that's larger than myself, and without the support of the people, my tribe, then I wouldn't be able to do this, but as a whole, we participate. And that is one of the things that they identified as 12-step programs were one of the major contributions to someone having a meaningful life. A lot of them said that's because I have participation in 12-step fellowship. So I'm going to mention quite a lot of the multi-modalities that's available now. And I thought I'd do that tonight because I felt like when I was hearing people come in, that, when things are just coming up into availability, I think there's this old 20th century mindset that we bring to things where it's either this or that. It's not both. You can't have both. You've got to choose between these things. And, in this 21st century, I think there has been change where I can have this now, and then I can add that, or I can have both of these together, and I can have this, and I might not need it for all time. So there's this more flow state in choosing what we need in the moment. People tend to think that we have addictive substances and they sort of hijack our life. And that's definitely one way to think about it. But what's interesting is the things that have now become addictive are not addictive to all of us. So it really has a lot to do with the intention that you set in the relationship, the way you relate to this thing. So whether that's a bar of chocolate, whether that's cell phone technology, all of these things. So Gabor Mate, who I know spoke here years ago, this ashram does have a tendency to bring in pioneering speakers. So in The Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which is a beautiful book that he wrote, he talks about this one addiction process. So lethal substance dependencies or frantic self-soothing of overeaters, shopaholics, the obsessions of gamblers, sexaholics, compulsive internet users, or the socially acceptable and even admired behaviors of the workaholic. So he's pointing out that all that behavior is just under this one addiction process. And I think that's like a breakthrough statement, really, because there's been a lot of confusion about what addiction is. So when we say one addiction process, people can maybe feel I wouldn't need to say included, but they can see that it encapsulates a lot of different behaviors as well as substances. So in yoga recovery, we refer to this thing that we see as the spread addiction. So the one addiction process that's alive and well within most of us, it's there, but it has many available pathways in our modern culture. So a culture that's enmeshed in consumerism, competition, confusion, codependency. And so then ultimately more and more people feeling this addiction. And this addiction relates to this sort of thing. If we were to ask you tonight, how many times or how often do you feel that you resort to a range of behaviors and substances? So you might go out sometimes and have more than you should to drink. And every now and then you might overuse some pharmaceuticals that you were prescribed, but now you just take them to change your mood. Drugs, overeating, which usually often comes with over-exercising, then fasting. It's like a continuum of behavior around food and exercise. Netflix binging, losing hours to social media, gaming, internet browsing, internet pornography, some cannabis use, shopping, retail therapy, we call it. And then dating, spending more than you have and having concerns and worries about that. Gambling, that's a big one for now for internet problems. Workaholism, acting out in relationships. And yet, even although that's on a little bit, like throughout a week, a month, a couple of months, you still feel lonely, you still feel something is lacking, and you're still unhappy and feeling unfulfilled. So that's the who that Yoga of Recovery is working with a lot now. So when Gabor Mate is saying that there's one addiction process, he's kind of suggesting that people are involved in all those different processes. So you could have a workaholic or you could have a compulsive shopper. But really with the change in availability is what I would think it is that is the behavior in one person, and it depends what day of the week you meet them. Yeah. So what happens with that is it's not very easy to say this person should go to this place for treatment, because this is an alcohol rehabilitation center, because this person doesn't really drink that much, but they're sort of crazy, but you can't really pinpoint why that is, because it's spread itself across so many different substances and behaviors that it's hard to really pick up what's wrong with the person. And so that allows even us as individuals to hide. I don't do it that much, Yeah, I was overeating yesterday, but today I'm on what's the big thing everybody does? The different master cleanses and things. Yeah, so it's not like there's anything wrong with the master cleanse, but it's not that healthy when it's just been preceded by, out of control eating and stuff like that. So people swinging back and forth and just finding a way to feel like seeking pleasure externally and never really coming home to find the inner joy or wisdom. So who comes to Yoga Recovery? We do have people in long-term recovery. Some are 12-steppers, many are not. And we have a lot of people who are reluctant to call themselves an addict. They're not really willing to wear that heavy label. Even although there is a purpose to the idea of, like, I'm aware that I'm doing something wrong, but I won't let anybody see it, which moves me into denial and suppression and hiding. And so an admission is a helpful thing. It's usually cathartic to release that. But it's not good to have that as a continuous identification. But we have ways to identify ourselves. Like I can say I'm a person in long-term recovery. I can say I'm a grateful member of 12-step fellowships. And so that allows you to know that I have come through some struggle, but it doesn't associate me deeply with the pathology now. So there's people who prefer secular self-help programs over the 12-step programs, and those who just don't know if it's an addiction, but they know they need help with something. So they come. There's also those who do yoga and those who don't do or can't do yoga, which I'm always happy about, because when I started Yoga of Recovery, the people that I knew that I wanted to come and experience this with us, they were like, oh no, I don't do yoga. Thinking it was the, advanced physical practice that I was asking them to come to. And of course, Yoga of Recovery really does bring in the 4 paths. So there's things that we can do that doesn't all happen on the mat. And just this little thing that we are not 12-step affiliated. So although we run a 12-step program when we're here in the ashram, that's not part of Yoga of Recovery. That's something that's added whilst we're here, because people find that a useful thing. But if you come on it, you do not need to attend a 12-step program. And if you're not on the program with us, you're also welcome to attend a meeting with us. They're every night at 6:45 in the meditation room, continuing in the meditation room. So who else comes on the yoga recovery? When I started it, I meant it really mostly as a retreat for people, and then people called and asked that I would turn that into a certificate course. So we've had addiction counsellors, nurses, marriage and family therapists, psychologists, psychotherapists, social workers, psychiatrists, yoga teachers, yoga therapists, Ayurvedic health practitioners, and Ayurvedic doctors. So they've come in to find out, what way can we have these conversations for this particular problem. And then what I noticed was that they're not two separate sets of people. So the professionals are also people that have overcome their own addictions. So they're also coming to stabilize themselves. And this is often the case now in the sort of yoga therapy or a healing modality like yoga recovery, that a lot of people are coming in to participate in it so they can stabilize themselves to do the job that they need to do out there in the world. Because without some form of self-care and without some form of like sadhana, they're not going to be able to keep it together, because it's kind of rough out there on the front lines, administering to people who are heavily addicted or suicidal or self-harming. You can imagine if you face that all day for 40 or 60 hours a week and you come home, you're going to need to be well resourced, and it's going to be very good to take a retreat to rest and receive some care and some education to have you go out refreshed and able to do what you're going to do out in the world again. And so I'm going to mention that we do teach them in ashrams, me in particular, because I feel a great resource and stability from being here and knowing that there's a lot more people on the team. And when people come into yoga recovery here, they have this amazing interactions with all different people, swamis and brahmacharyas and people in the kitchen and people in the yoga class. And it's really good that it's a mix of people, that it's not all one type of person. So there's a great benefit to that. And, for me, there's a great benefit that they don't have to listen to me all day long. Like, I don't teach the yoga and then teach the class. And it's good that I also don't have to cook the meals. And that's what I have to do at my own house. So I'm really glad when I come here. So from the perspective of when professional people come in, then we have set it up that we can give yoga teachers and yoga therapists and Ayurvedic practitioners continuing education. It's questionable whether we're ready to be able to do that for every profession, because it's quite a lot to keep up with. But always be in touch with us if you feel like that's something that you would like to help us with. Because in the past, we have had people that are members of boards and they've helped us get continuing education. So it brings people in. So this picture was taken over at Yogaville, and this picture incorporates everything that I've just talked about. Some of these people are early recovery. Some of them would never say they're an addict. Some of them are professionals. Some of those professionals are in recovery, barely making it in their daily life. So there's a range of people, and I think generally you would never know who they were unless you meet them and they come into that safe space to be able to share all of that. And that's what I really feel that has been created in all of this. So a little bit of where we get to with yoga recovery here at a symposium level. And I like this story because I was in India and someone was writing to me saying there's this multiple pathways of recovery conference, and why don't you submit to be a speaker? And I found that a lot of conferences are dominated by people who own rehabs, and there's a sort of inner marketing going on between them. And when I say owning a rehab, one bed for a month in a rehab is $20,000 and up. So they're operating at a different financial buy-in level than I'm usually operating at. So I was kind of like, I don't think that's worth it, because all these, it's like writing your own resume over and over again to submit. And so then this email came, said, Durga, we're kind of waiting for you to submit because we definitely want to represent yoga as a pathway. And it was one of our Shivananda teachers from the New York ranch, Ananda Devi. And this is a Shivananda teacher who works out there in the world and is now trained as a recovery coach that works in emergency departments. And that's a fantastic place to be to get some of this work done. So I filled in the form and I presented at this conference for the last 2 years, and I will present there next year again. So that's where I met Dawn Cohese, who was supposed to be here with us. So like prayers for Dawn, because his doctor told him it's best that you don't take international travel right now. He's elderly, maybe somewhere in his 70s, and he has a fairly heavy schedule of speaking. And Dawn operates the red road to wellbriety. So he's very active in First Nation recovery and going around to the tribal reservations and, speaking the language of recovery and bringing that healing. And then tomorrow night we have Dr. John Kelly, and he's from the Recovery Research Institute. So they were both speakers in this first conference. And, when I needed a speaker for here, I went back to them because I'd seen them and really admired and liked what they had to say. And, they both just said, yeah, I'll come. So John will be with us tomorrow night, and he has some really interesting research in the science and stuff on the different aspects of recovery and what looks to be working. Yoga recovery is part of this. Like I say, it will be there in Florida in November. And what they were surprised at was that yoga is a multiple pathway, because of course they think it's put the yoga mat down and we'll do some exercises. So they were delighted to hear about the 4 paths of yoga and Ayurveda. And then in this conference, there's medication-assisted detox, which is kind of like a no-go subject for some people. They won't even consider it. There's Christ-centered, celebrate recovery. And this whole list, some of it's 12 steps, some of it's abstinence-based, some of it's choice-based on CBT. And I'm putting that up there because I think people don't really know where that list is, where if I was looking for something alternative to what I may have tried that I didn't really feel resonated with me, like what's available. So hopefully this will show you that there's things other than the main medical model or even the spiritual abstinence-based 12-step programs. And then when I say that, I want to say this thing to you. They're not as widely available. So I'll often sit with someone in a consultation and they'll say, I'm interested in this. And I'll say, where do you live? And you live in Dakota, Chandika, yeah? Nebraska, sorry. So then I'll say, okay, Nebraska. It's going to be a little unlikely maybe. So you might get a lot of this centered in places like Florida, California, New York. And then when you go into from there, it might not be so widely available. But 12-step programs are. So there's something about availability on the healing side also that just makes it more useful. So that's helpful. So when can yoga recovery help? This is a pretty big question. So my answer would be now, especially if you're feeling like I'm interested in this, like, can it help me? Should I come, should I join the one that's starting? Then it would be a good idea to do it. So if you're ready to say, I'm done with it, admit that you have a problem. If you're ready to say, I'm asking for help, that's a huge step. And it should be something that if you could take the support of a group and have some education, it could probably stabilize and solidify for you to feel more free in your life. And then we have this requirement that if you're alcohol or chemically dependent, we ask that you have 90 days continuous sobriety before you join us on the retreat. And that's within yoga recovery, the 90-day requirement. And just because we're not a medical detox, we're not a rehab facility. So we wouldn't want to invite people in where we wouldn't actually have the facilities or skills to be able to deal what might come up with them. And when it comes to the behavioral addictions and the eating disorders, we're asking that you have enough stability to embark on this work. So enough stability to be able to self-initiate a fairly disciplined daily schedule and show up, because, you know, rehab's able to have staff and more one-on-one attention. A place like this does not. You have to like get up and voluntarily come for sessions. We don't have people that can go and find you. And so there's this thing that I want to say, that the ashram is not a rehab. So the ashram is obviously a place where there's a continuation of a spiritual foundation that you might have found in recovery. But the ashram has a different primary function than what a rehab does. So a lot of us do come here for our own rehab purposes, but we fit ourselves into the ashram. The ashram doesn't fit itself to us. And that really brings us up, because oftentimes it is the aspirational nature that draws us to this place. And so this place can be challenging. Like, maybe I don't want to do all of this. You might notice that in TTC, like 4 hours of asana a day, 2 satsangs a day. Like normally we wouldn't actually do that without like being on the attendance sheet. But as we do it, we'll kind of meet ourselves, and then there's pieces that we have to let go of because we can't carry all the stuff that we're carrying. So it's quite the event and the process that you'll be going through. So again, when can it help? So the understanding of this, I think a lot of people think we're offering yoga recovery, so we should, you know, people should be just coming out of rehab and coming here to the ashram. But it's a lot longer than that, because the whole addiction isn't an event. It doesn't just take place, and therefore neither does recovery. It's this whole continuous progressive process. So people might want to come into yoga recovery for all different reasons, like change of job, retirement, divorce, that's part of a recovery pathway. And they might just want a little retreat and a little rest, and, you know, to be given more resources to find themselves a little more. So what is it? What is it not is always a good thing to start with. It's not a one-size-fits-all prescription or a treatment protocol. So I always found that it was an issue when I talked to people in rehabs, because it felt like they just wanted these components that you just deliver, and you deliver it to anybody. So when it becomes this more individually, personally based, guided process, that model doesn't really know how to fully incorporate it. It's also not an opinion on drug policy, which a lot of people want to draw me into. You know, should this be legal and all the rest of it? Like, that's kind of beyond my scope of practice. It's not a detox, it's not a rehab, it's not a hatha yoga training. Again, when you say yoga, a lot of people think I become a yoga teacher. That's not what we do. So I often say it's more a life plan than a lesson plan that you're going to walk out with. And it's not a 12-step meeting. It's not aligned with the 12 steps, even although we make reference to them. So what we do during our time together is we reframe the addiction problem from a Vedic perspective. So we're using, for instance, the 3 bodies, the 5 veils and sheaths. And we were just talking about this week, so this is something that I threw up on a slide to mention, that you do have a disease-based medical model, and their current definition of addiction is that it is a chronic relapsing brain disease. And that's the medical model talking, and the medical model deals pretty much with the physical body. And so at that level, we could say, yes, we can see what you're saying there, because in this 5-element being that works mainly on chemicals, and the brain being an organ in the body, then there is this disruption. There is the neuroscientists talking about the wiring and the firing and the too much of this and not enough of that, too much dopamine, not enough, all of that. So it's a component, but it's not the full picture, especially when it comes to holistic medicine. And it's interesting how people get very confused about what holistic medicine is rather than like complementary or alternative medicine. So if this isn't a prescription and I'm using a supplement, then this is holistic medicine. And, you know, that's still kind of on the same level. You're still working with the chemical reactions of the body, and it's a big part of Ayurveda. But then there's the subtle body. And so the subtle body is a kind of major part of what yoga would be working with the mind. And then my teacher, David Frawley, says then we're working on the electrical level. And so this things like heart math, the resonance of the heart rate variability, that's more aligned with where you are in the prana body and the energy of the prana in the heart. And then there's this causal body level, so the spirit, but the karmic blueprint. And so the actions of previous births, previous lives. And David Frawley talks about how that works on a magnetic level. And, you know, when we talk about that in class, it gives a whole new perspective to the events in your life. And, you know, when we come together in Yoga Recovery and those people end up in that room with us for the 7 days, that, you know, that's the karmas drawing in on that magnetic level that we are here to do this together. And for me, it's always led me into more ability to be in acceptance of what is, because I understand myself as more than just this physical body. And when it comes to my life and the people that I work with, we all have some inkling of the reality of our being beyond the physical body. So there's plenty of people that will point out that you can't reduce people to their neurochemistry. And even although scientists talk about us as if the body was designed to carry around a brain and it's the brain that's doing everything, it's my attention that yoga always talks about the heart. So the spiritual heart center, because that would be more of the focus. It would be the seat of prana, the seat of the immune system, the seat of rasa, like the juice of life. And so those things come from prana practices, and prana is not something that is material that could be easily measured. And when we talk about that to people, then they have the felt experience of it to start with, but then they begin to see how if we allow ourselves to be guided only by the disease-based medicine model that is based in the physical body, then that's moving towards reductionism, as we call it. So there's more to be said. It's an invitation of a solution for you now. Again, that depends where you are on your journey. It's an accessible solution. So it's not just a physical yoga practice. And of course, accessible yoga is one of the ways that we now speak about yoga. So everyone can come and even practice the physical part of the yoga. It's a conversation about this one addiction process, a process of created self-inquiry. And I like this one, the evolution of the solution, because I really do think in the 21st century, that's where we need to go. We need to, transcend this, the bipartisan idea of it's that or this. So we have to be able to see the spectrum, and we have to be able to experience those different states from like a more centered state of calm and consciousness. And we practice that every day in Yoga Recovery with every afternoon at 4:30, we come into the meditation room this week and lay down and did Yoga Nidra eye rest. Now, to do that every day with the same people for a good 50 minutes in the same room, it really allows you to rest. It really allows you to digest the things that we've been talking about and, go into the body-based, breath-based, sensation-based awareness of consciousness living us and having all these experiences. So not so fearful to feel something like pain, not to medicate it away so quickly, but to be able to go in, to feel into it, to resolve it. And that would be very skillful response. And that's the sort of response that the medical world really needs. And it needs that from people like us that are trained in something beyond the physical reality of the body. And, you know, the pranic body is really governed by attention. So where your attention goes, your prana flows. So the idea of being able to use intention and attention and repetition and guidance, then that will have the neural circuits re-establish themselves. And it does take that. So we need to have the practice. So I was going to mention that there's 2 retreats and training with Yoga of Recovery, Healing the Habits That Bind Us, and between the mat and the meeting. So one centers on looking at the roots of the addictive behavior. So it says our understanding of our suffering defines the nature of our solution. And so we inquire into what is this suffering that you have. And we look into the definition of addiction, but really what we do is go down into heart space and go into what does it feel like to be around this suffering. And then when we get those words and we look around the room, we understand each other because then we're in the feeling state. And so it's okay to be there. And then we're going to find ways that we can work with that. So we're really looking to treat the roots and not the symptoms. And that is the idea of my training in Ayurveda. Don't treat the symptoms, get down to the roots so that you can eradicate the disease from the source. So it is the nature of humans to create narrative. As healers, we allow the story to be told, listen deeply, then help reweave the story. And so how we help do this is we have these 6 tenets of Yoga of Recovery. And the 6 tenets are there. So it's life is longing, life is prana, life is relationship, life is sweet, life is love, life is progress. And what that does is allow us to access the comprehensive system of yoga according to our current needs. So rather than me foisting a yoga path on you, we wait to hear your story and we train ourselves to hear, oh, this is a relationship aspect. So we have like the practices of bhakti that allow us to have the yoga of relationship, the yoga of devotion, you know, to transform emotions into devotion so that we can live more peacefully with ourselves and with others. So each tenet gives us a couple of paths of yoga where we can offer tools and behaviors for the person to experiment with in their life. So the yoga that best allows us to express this inherent energy in a more conscious way. So what we're saying is the actual thing itself isn't the pathology, it's the way that we pursue it. So for life is longing, we say if you do not honor the longing, which is your longing to reconnect to source and find your self-realization, that it will corrupt into craving, that you'll believe that you can meet that at a material level. And that means you'll keep buying new cars or keep eating food or keep working and to get more money and more power, but you'll still have that gap, that hole in the soul. So we're looking at this to be able to recognize and honor the seeking that we see. So seeking, life is longing. I'm always changing the words. So now it's eternal union, truth, bliss. Because when we ask, what do you long for? People give us these words, these aspirational words of the heartfelt desire and the heartfelt longing. And then for the others, we're seeking vitality. We're seeking connection and belonging, beauty, true power, and then guidance, which we can say is good orderly direction. So we're sometimes we feel a bit lost and we just need someone to help us, like, this is the way to go. And I've been there before myself, so you're not alone and I'll walk beside you. So ultimately, the six tenets are the medicine of spirit, the medicine of life force, the medicine of connection, the medicine of tender, loving care, TLC. which is not THC, which is the new medicine that everybody wants to be on. The medicine of liberation and freedom and life is progress. The medicine of cumulative change, that we understand that you might take a few steps forward and then regress back a bit. But that doesn't mean that the whole thing is a waste of time. So this is to be expected, and that we just keep getting up and moving on. And the company that we keep will have a lot to do with that. So we say it's time that we need to reclaim our lives and our heroic journeys and our ability to share, respond, care, and heal in our communities. So whilst the medical model demands evidence-based medicine, we talk about experience-based medicine. And when we talk about experience, we're talking about a 5,000-year-old healing system. So there's some experience behind this. Is that not evidence? Apparently not always. But I think that's going to be changing. So alongside the retreats that we offer, we also have now, and this has been over the last couple of 5 years, that Yoga Recovery is part of a pioneering Ayurvedic sustainable village in South India. So we know there's a physical component to this healing. We have a highly skilled doctors in Ayurveda with years of full doctor experience, like running clinics, treating people with cancer and strokes and arthritis. And so we take groups over, and oftentimes we're dealing with the healing of metabolism, like the gut repair, so chemical and hormonal rebalancing. And if you can imagine how needed that is when you've had people that have taken in lots of drugs or alcohol, or have had eating disorders that have really corrupted the ability to digest. And it is astounding to me still that most of the medicine in this country skips over the physical aspects like the gut and goes straight to repair the brain, even although most of the neurotransmitters that the brain is making use of is coming from the gut, and the gut is in great disrepair. So helping people get off, and this is how generally people talk about it, but we've helped people get off Suboxone, cannabis, cigarettes, and for myself, asthma medication. So even though you heard me say I used the ashram as a smoking rehab, the addict that I was would take a blast on the inhaler, then light up the cigarette. So, when we come with these addictive problems, I was presentable. You would meet me and think I was kind of sensible and stuff, and yet I had this mad, addicted part of myself that was determined to, self-destruct. So that's one thing about addiction. It's we can show a face to the world that hides the real madness that's going on inside. So we get to the Recovery Symposium. So over the next 4 days, which is 10, 11, 12, 13, John, who I've mentioned, Anita Johnson, who's sitting here, and Anita is an eating disorder specialist and author of Eating in the Light of the Moon, which is one of the most profound books that I've ever read on help for people with eating disorders. So using story, myth, and metaphor to understand what's going on with people, especially with something that we are all addicted to, food. And then Nikki Myers is coming tomorrow evening, I think, and she's the founder of Y12SR. I'm sure many of you know Nikki. After this, we have Between the Mat and the Meeting, which is the 7-day yoga recovery where we focus more on Ayurveda for addictions. So when I say between the mat and the meeting, there's this piece where you have a physical yoga practice and maybe a meeting, 12 steps, or maybe a meeting with a therapist. So that's 2 hours of your day. And as a person in early recovery, I really needed help with the other 22 hours. Like, what was I supposed to eat, and how was I supposed to sleep, and how was I supposed to have energy for my life? And so that's what that one is based around. And it's really based around the understanding of the constitutional self. So the Constitution allows us to personalize and embody the recommendations and feel as if they'll work for us or the one size fits all, how it might not land or really be able to heal us. So I'm going to skip over a few. And just to mention this piece again, that really, where do we have them? Like I say, having them here at the ashram is, to me, it's a helpful thing, because also, you know, I have 8 months of my year out in different places teaching. And so one of the things that I like about coming here is that this place runs 365 days of the year. And when someone discovers that they really have a yearning and a longing to learn more and study a scripture, then they can come back here and it's there for them. So I'm not fostering codependence with me, which is what is an unhealthy way to offer the education and the healing, but to bring it into a stabilized place where there's always this offering, and it's a stable, powerful offering because it's been going on for so long. So this year, after this, I'll be in California, then over in Virginia, which is our cousin ashram, Yogaville, and then up in New York in October. And then it's also taught in yoga therapy schools. So I'm mentioning the Shivananda Yoga Health Education training in California and Vietnam. So Vietnam is a beautiful new ashram where they're doing that training. And then I also teach yoga recovery for yoga therapists in Soul of Yoga and Inner Peace Yoga Therapy. And that's where some of our students came this time. So they're just about to finish that 800-hour training that they've been in. And so this is what we have going on next year. So you've seen what's coming up in the next 4 days, and the way we live. Next year's all organized. So we have Phil Valentine, who's a founder and organizer of this multiple pathways of recovery. And then Dr. Ram Kumar, who's the founder of the Ayurvedic Healing Village. And then Joan Ifland, who's the author of Processed Food Addiction, and she runs a website called Food Addiction Reset, where a lot of people are going for help. And then we'll do that same yoga of recovery either side of that. So getting into the roots and then also getting into the embodied self to help us through these journeys that we're all on, this one addiction process. So that is time for me to end. I probably didn't think I was going to take questions, but I am talking at noon tomorrow. So if people have questions, then I'm around the ashram. TTC, if you have questions, I'm here for these 4 days and then another 7 days. Same for staff and karma yogis. So all people, yoga of recovery, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Chitra, my assistant, for being here and assisting all week long. And Celine has arrived to be here and assist the next one. And I look forward to these 4 days with everybody. Om Namah Shivaya.